Okay, so we are ready with more questions. Who wants to go?
Yes, ma'am. Kirti, ma'am.
Yes, Kirti.
Uh, Ma'am, is it visible?
Yes, it is now. What is the subject matter?
My subject is climate change litigation.
There's nothing in the question
Climate
paper.
change.
The question paper doesn't have any heading. What subject it is?
Actually, I just made it.
Hmm.
So, 1 second. Actually, I just made it, so it's not like it's
Okay.
just a rough thing which I drafted.
Define the con. You're not supposed to be sharing rough draft with us. We are
Ma'am,
here
I
for
just like
final
made it like
opinions.
right now. I just made it right now because like I didn't had like done it a bit.
Yeah, so then we are not looking at drafts. No? We want you to be
Ma'am, like
sure
what
about your
was sharing.
question. We want to be
No,
sure about you should be sure about your question so that we can think that what is our response to that. If I say something, you say, this was still a rough draft.
no.
Define
It's
the
not like
concept
that.
of adaptation and mitigation under climate change regime. Describe and analyze how Paris Agreement reaches the balance between the two. Support your answer by referring to the legal requirements in relation to the concepts in Paris Agreement. So all environment fellows, please respond. What do you think needs to be written in this? The 20-mark question for LLM. Any environmental law research scholar?
No, ma'am. Ma'am, may I? This is Sonam.
Yes, please.
Ma'am, actually, the question talks about first, it talks about define the concept of adaptation and mitigation. And then, second part of the question asks about describe and analyze how Paris Agreement reaches balance between the two. So, basically, I am confused that whether I have to first define everything or the concept of adaptation and mitigation. I mean, I'm confused about the question, a little confused about the question, how to start.
For me, even the third one, which says support your answer.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm kind of for and against. Describe and analyze. So how will I analyze without looking at the legal requirements in the Paris Agreement? Can I do that
That
without referring to the legal provisions in Paris Agreement?
no, ma'am.
And then
That
when you say support, which means that there can be views for and against.
okay.
What
I
you are
get it.
actually
I get
saying is explain your answer by referring to the legal requirements. This is my sense.
yes.
That
I
Ma'am,
wanted
used.
also,
actually
Yes,
what I
Akshat.
wanted was
Hmm.
ma'am, may I speak? I'm
Yes.
Kirti. Ma'am, actually, what I wanted was ki after they define the basic concept of adaptation and mitigation,
Hmm.
the students should actually try to uh, trace how Paris Agreement incorporates the both concepts because like there are several agreements, so these are foundation concepts and both concepts have to be traced under this Paris Agreement. So, yes, the support is not the correct word. It
Hmm.
should be explain your answer because I want the students to actually cite the legal requirements, basically.
So you could just say,
It's
no,
kind of a cue
uh,
to them.
refer to the legal provisions in Paris Agreement on the subject.
Okay.
The other thing is also whether this concept of adaptation and mitigation pre-existed the Paris Agreement or they
Yes,
were
ma'am.
evolved in the Paris Agreement.
No, it actually pre-existed in UNFCCC, which is the framework, foundation framework, you can say. And
Mhm.
under that framework, there are different agreements like Kyoto Protocol and Paris. And
Mhm.
these concepts have been evolved throughout. For example, they started in UNFCCC, and these are basically basic elements which we can found in each and every agreement of climate change. So what I wanted to do is ki, these are basic concepts, and now how Paris Agreement deals with these concepts.
No, but whether this adaptation and mitigation had conflicting position there, because only then the question of balancing between the two will arise. Are these
No,
conflicting
they're not.
positions?
No, they're not conflicting.
Then where is the
Actually,
question of balance? Why would you need to balance?
basically, what I wanted to ask was ki, how much the agreement deals with, how much of the agreement deals with adaptation, and how
So
much
then
of
there's
the
a deal. If you use
agreement.
the word balance, which means that these are competing concepts. For me,
No,
that's
they are
what it
not.
means. Adaptation and mitigation is a balance. You're saying that there are some tension in adaptation, there are some in mitigation. You need to balance the tension.
They're not competing.
So they're not competing, then you need to reformulate.
Okay.
Next.
Can you also review my second question?
No.
Okay.
Everybody has to
Uh,
review their own question in light of discussion we're having today.
okay.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Should I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Can you see the question?
Yes. Please read.
So, ma'am, my first question is integrating a gender perspective into military operation is logical in terms of promoting both justice and effectiveness. So, this is a statement, and in the light of the above statement, discuss how the role of gender can be introduced into the strategic, operational, and tactical levels in the institution of military.
So, what is the gender perspective?
Ma'am, into the military operations that I'm talking about.
No. What is gender in military law? That's a starting point. What you mean by when you're
So,
saying
ma'am,
integrating a gender perspective? What do you mean?
ma'am,
Who has made this
through
statement?
the ma'am, this is a statement taken up by me from a reading, and it has been made by two authors.
Hmm.
And ma'am, the name is Lena P. Quarwing and Rachel Grimes.
Hmm.
They talk about how and why gender is so vital to military operations, and how various military operations and their aftermaths, they have a gendered result, they have a gendered repercussions, and how then it becomes very imperative to read gender perspective into those military operations in the first place.
Whether there's a difference between military operations and institution of military?
uh, Ma'am, there is, because
Your statement relates to the military operations and your question relates to institution of military.
ma'am, military
And
operations
and
would
also
flow
my other
from the
question will
institution
be,
of.
Jatin, My other
Yes,
question
ma'am.
will be that whether in this question you are
Yes, ma'am.
only asking how it can be introduced, or you want them also to identify how it has already been introduced, to what extent.
Ma'am, both the things
But you're not
actually.
asking that the thing can be introduced. Because if you ever ask that, how it has been introduced and what are the limitations on it, then it's both. And what can be done to remove the limitations. If that's what you're asking for, then you need to frame it differently. Present, it is only
Okay, ma'am.
saying that it is not there and how can it be introduced. Isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, can
Okay.
it be also like this that it has always existed there, but the students would have to locate it and then uh,
Locate what?
locate the gender which has always been there in the institution of military.
No, it's a question of when you say gender perspective. One is
Yes,
that,
ma'am.
oh, it has always been a male force and that is the gender perspective we have, and that's it.
Yes, ma'am.
Then you're not talking about other genders.
Yes, ma'am.
Then there's nothing that that this is already there. If you're meaning gender as saying, because certainly the military is a very gendered group. They're all male.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
So
ma'am.
if this is what is meant by the reference to the word gender, then what is it that you're asking? What is it that you're asking here? You're asking women to be included. You're asking PG to be included. What is it that you're asking them to think, focus on? Or you're asking that, okay, men and then men and men and men and alone. What is it that you're asking?
Now I'm basically, trying my students to come up with the disparity of gender that is there in the military institution and how this disparity can be, uh, you know, addressed and can be corrected through some of the measures that can
No,
be
I'm again
taken in
asking whether
strategic
no, I
operational.
you need to deconstruct the word gender, because male is
Okay,
also
ma'am.
a gender. Now, the man is also a
Yes, ma'am.
gender, woman is a gender, transgender is gender.
Yes,
So what is it that you are asking for?
ma'am. I'm asking about only the gender and not the just male gender or the female or the transgender gender things. I'm asking about the sensitization of gender inside the military altogether.
But they are very
How
sensitive to
there needs
women. They
to.
all the biggest officer will stand and the lowest wife will not stand. They are very gender sensitive. Once they're not gender sensitive, they're trained into
Ma'am,
respecting
but
women a lot.
ma'am, but that is that sensitivity reflects in those military operations that is there in my question.
No, but you are so when no, I'm asking you again the question. When you said, in the light of the above statement, discuss how role of gender can be introduced. Now, what is role of gender which will not to be introduced in the strategic, operational, and tactical levels in the institution of military?
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, role of
And
gender would
and
be
and and and
some.
also when you say military law, in our terminology, if I remember correctly, military is the on the ground. It is not armed forces. We are specifically focusing on military or focusing on armed forces.
I'm armed forces.
Yeah, but you're not using that word. When you say armed
Okay. Am
forces,
I correct?
so when you say armed forces, then because the what is the gender perspective you're talking about? That's my question. Because gender perspective is very, very neutral in that sense. That if it is only men, this is also a gender perspective. And as I say that
Okay, ma'am.
integrating gender diversity then I can understand. But if it is not gender diversity you're talking about, you're just saying gender, then I'm not too sure what is it that we are expecting our students to write about. It's free for all. Anybody can write whatever they want to write.
All right, ma'am.
Or technical levels is enough, na? Levels of military, of armed forces, of the institution of military is little kind of too many words and unnecessary words. Operation
Okay.
technical levels in armed forces. But your statement is also about the operations and not about the institution.
Okay, ma'am. Do this.
How to be gender inclusive, diversity inclusive, something on those lines.
All right, ma'am.
We have also another comment we have. Ankur, do you want to share? You've sent a comment, Ankur. Ankur. Okay. So we certainly need to, and also, when you are use the above statements, justice and effectiveness, we are
Yes,
also
ma'am.
talking about um, effectiveness for what purpose?
Ma'am, effectiveness
No,
of
because I'm not very sure
the.
that, the statement you have taken, it's very, very loaded and it's very unclear to me.
Okay, ma'am. So, ma'am, it is basically the effectiveness of the military operations.
Justice कहाँ से आएगा? How is the justice and effectiveness together?
Ma'am, justice through more inclusivity of various genders,
No, but then a
and
lot of
not just
military,
talking about.
lot of armed forces people think that effectiveness is affected because of the justice to women. We are putting women into all kinds of lines and they are not effective. People do not think that justice and effectiveness go together.
Ma'am, but they can actually, because in
No, look at
according
the
to these
all the
authors which I'm
traditional
talking
look
about.
at all the traditional objections we have had against including women in the army. They cannot run.
Yes,
If they
ma'am.
get caught by the enemy, they will be raped and molested, and they will not be able to bear the same extent of torture which men can. So that is all seen as that for army to be effective, they must have the sturdy, hard men. And women are supposed to be soft and caring and loving and affectionate. So the very nature construction of women doesn't fit into the characterization of a armed officer.
Yes, ma'am.
So for effectiveness, we require all that. For justice, we need women there. So in that sense, the two
So,
are
ma'am,
seen as
but
opposing
that is
to
a
each other.
stereotype. Ma'am,
Yeah,
wouldn't you say that is a stereotype?
I do not know whether you want. So, what do you want the armed forces to look like? The stereotypical women, or you would want the women to look like men? You want armed soldiers to behave like women, or you want the women to behave like armed soldiers? Both of them are completely different than each other in their bringing up. So, how do you expect your armed forces to be like?
Ma'am, they should be more constitutional and not just, be either like men or less like women, and not that kind of a binary thing that we need to think about. They
When you
need to be
think of
more
armed
humanistic. They
forces,
need to be.
what is their function? What are they supposed to do? What are the challenges they have? And what is required to meet those challenges? Are the questions were asked?
Yes, ma'am.
We have this, uh, this whole situation that when we wanting to deconstruct women, we want to deconstruct men, we want to also deconstruct the armed forces. So unless you change the very nature of armed forces, whether you want them integrated, these are the questions to be talked about also, not necessarily in
Yes,
this
ma'am.
question, but for me, there are two things. One is the level of question, that is the kind of question we have framed, The second is that what is it that we are going to address in the course itself.
Yes.
So you are still at the first stage also, that when you use the word gender in military law or armed forces, then what are the aspects of gender that you want to talk about and how do you construct that? Because gender is always a social construct.
Yes, ma'am.
We're not talking about sex identification in military law in armed.
Certainly, ma'am.
So, okay, Jatin, we need to look at another, the last one for today because we need to
Okay,
Ma'am,
ma'am.
very
I
quickly.
have a question.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask one question. When it is saying, discuss how the role of gender can be introduced into the strategic, operational, and tactical levels in the armed forces. First of all, my question is, are these the only three levels in the armed forces? Number one, can we also do away with these three segregations and write just the armed forces so that the question does not become too technical? Can that be done?
It can be done depending on what is the level of the students' preparedness and our conversation in the classrooms. So if it is,
Mm-hmm.
it can be either way. But once you do not give these three
Okay.
categories there and the student focuses on strategic and not operational, then you can't blame them
Mm-hmm.
because that will be that
Right.
student's sense of how much. So the first question only Jatin will answer whether these are the only three levels at which the
Right.
question arises. Jatin, what's your
Right.
response?
Ma'am, I believe these are not uh, exhaustible three
Exhaustive.
categories. They can be. No, it isn't actually.
Given an
And
example of one
also,
more.
uh, ma'am, I can't think of right now.
Yeah, because
But
the whole
I,
question is that if these are the only three, if there are more, so then if there are more, then certainly identifying that these are the three we wanted to focus.
Right.
In
Right.
yeah, but if there are more, then if you ask a generic question, then it may become too big. So it's all a question of
Mhm.
it will
ma'am,
depend on
basically I put these three categories because I wanted to, my students to locate these three categories into a particular reading and then go and answer about it.
Mhm. Yeah. So they're coming from a
So
specific
Definitely.
that's
reading,
how.
then you can also perhaps mention to the reading.
Okay, ma'am, I'll do that.
Mm. You can trace it also. They will know that no, this is the reason that you're asking for them from.
Okay, ma'am.
Ma'am, I too have a question.
Yes, Shikhar.
Ma'am, the statement talks about the merits of including gender in military operations.
Mm-hmm.
But the question starts like in the light of the above statement, and it wants to students to explain how gender can be introduced into the operations.
Mm.
So I wanted to know that it is if a reasonable practice to that statement is complete. Statement talks about the merits, but the question talks about how gender can be introduced.
Yeah,
Like
that's a
there's
strategy
a little.
question. Yeah, true. Even just explaining the above statement, it would have been enough.
Okay, ma'am.
You agree with the statement, you don't agree with the statement, that would have been a question. But people may have, because at this point of time, we do have very, very divided opinion on the subject matter. So it can be a for
All
against
right, ma'am.
question also.
Ma'am, ma'am, once again, I wanted to ask, like, can we put a statement and then ask the students, like, expect the students to, through my question, to not really go into that statement, but ask something different from that statement. Like this talks about the merits of gender in
Hmm.
military, but the question talks about how gender can be introduced into the
No,
military.
because in this one, in this formulation, Jatin is not asking them to elaborate the first statement. This is then this is accepted fact.
Right,
So using that as an expected fact, then you're saying now find out what are the ways to do it.
right.
It is
Means
not
this is
allowing them
also a
to
nice
challenge the
approach.
first statement. What I'm saying is
Yes.
that it can also be possible because in the current scenario in India, there is a very big challenge to the statement itself. We are saying, no, no,
Right.
even now infantry women can't go. So we are in
Yes, ma'am.
India, we are at a stage where we are challenging the very first statement also. Jatin is coming from the position that we are not asking them to challenge the first statement. We are saying that is the correct one and we had to all aspire for it and therefore explore, do the brainstorming and find out how to do it.
Ma'am,
It
means
is
both
possible.
are good approaches to frame a
Yeah, it
question.
is possible to do that. But for me, this I
Okay.
also pointed out that in the first one, it is only talking about military operation, while he's talking initially he was talking about the institution. So there has to be an understanding that we are, and also talking about introducing gender at certain levels and introducing it as an institution are different things because institution is all comprehensive. This is much more a static body than the
Yes.
operations, etc. are.
Okay, ma'am.
Ma'am, I have a
Jatin,
Right.
question.
yes,
Ma'am, I wanted to ask one more thing. When we ask such questions, is it like imply that we're talking about India, or such a question can be also put up, like answered with different perspectives, as in the developing countries, or the developed countries, or the underdeveloped countries? So, how do we go about it? I am unable to understand this
yeah. So that
the
may be
answering
another
of such a
angle to
question.
the question, Jatin. That were you asking a question in abstract, or you're asking the question in the context of India? If it's the context of
Ma'am,
India,
I'm
then we'll
not
have to say
Because
specifically
the answers
asking
would
about.
differ.
yes.
Because the
Yes,
answers would
I'm.
differ.
I'm not specifically asking about the scenario in India. It is more of a, like ma'am said, an abstract or a general question. I mean, I would want my students to talk about developing, underdeveloping, or the developed countries, all the perspectives. So, I mean, it's not just specifically to the Indian jurisdiction.
Mhm. So then one could, from that perspective, one can say how it has been done in US, what is the status which is happening in India, what kind of strategies have been used. So we are not saying what has been introduced, but how it has been made possible.
Right, because the can be
And
introduced
also,
part would
and
stand
also,
defeated.
Jatin, you have said
Yes, ma'am.
discuss. You're not saying discuss how gender can be introduced. You're saying how the role of gender can be introduced. So what is that?
Yes, ma'am.
So it's just how gender can be introduced, or
Okay, ma'am.
gender inclusiveness may be promoted in the armed forces.
Okay, ma'am.
I think we need to stop at this one because we do want to have a very quick look at the aspect of framing a question. We'll end this meeting
Okay, ma'am.
and we'll just go on the second one, fourth meeting.